We're back out here once again, and today we're talking about when's the best time to give up on a presentation and move on to something else. Well, there's two ways of looking at it, and we're going to cover both of those. Stick around, you don't want to miss this one. Got him! And here is this video's featured comment. Congratulations! If you would like to have a chance to have your comment featured in an upcoming video, all you've got to do is leave a comment. And now, on with the video. Welcome back to Lowbrow Fishing. And in the last video, we talked about what to do when those bass get super finicky, when they get laser focused on something and they completely ignore whatever it is you're throwing, whether it's a worm, whether it's a crankbait, topwater, whatever. Those bass are just completely turned off on anything that's not the real deal. That's not a real shad, a real shiner, a real bluegill, or whatever. And we talked about ways that we can still go about enticing those bites. And the example that I gave was, on the big lake, we just reached the tail end of the bluegill spawn. And there are clouds and clouds of those little bluegill fry everywhere. Thousands of these clouds with millions of little bluegill fry. And the bass are having a feast. As a result, they're ignoring everything else. And we talked about some ways to still elicit some bites. And that's what I've been doing lately. I've been using those little bluegill fry as a way to attract the bass with topwater, a topwater frog specifically, and fishing something really small. Right here, I've got a little 1/8 ounce Z-Man chatterbait swim head jig. You know, this is just a little swim bait jig. And I've got a Berkley, I believe this is actually a gulp minnow that I have tied on here. I fished it all day. You can see it got tore up pretty good. It didn't catch anything huge, you know, nothing over 1.5 pounds or anything like that, but I was still able to get some nice bites by downsizing that presentation. You know, it's a no-brainer, right? It's a no-brainer. We're going to make that presentation as tiny as we can whenever we're fishing through clouds of little baby fry, trying to elicit those strikes. But the question becomes, when do we put things away that aren't working? And there's two ways of looking at that, for the day and for the season. Now, for the day, we'll go out to the lake. We have something in mind because we've done our homework like we talked about. We're looking at the conditions and we look at where those bass are set up and we say, this is going to be what I'm using today. This is what's going to work. You tie it on and out you go to the water. Problem is, it's not going like you think it should. And we all know about KVD's 15-minute rule. After 15 minutes, if something doesn't work for him, he's cutting and retying or he's finding new water. And that's a great way to do it. But are we done with that presentation for the day or just in that spot? Or is there maybe a later point or a different section of water where that presentation can still catch some fish? And that's what we really need to talk about. You know, yesterday, the wife and I, we were out on the little boat and we were fishing topwater frogs. There was a specific spot in the water that we knew was holding active fish. We could see them. They were jumping, they were splashing, they were going after those balls of fry. And we figured going after them with a topwater frog, that pat, pat, pat on the surface like we talked about, especially since there was a lot of thick hydrillomats everywhere, that was going to be the deal. That's how we were going to attack them. But we weren't able to set up properly. That little boat gets blown around on the water all over the place. It's like a dry leaf in the wind. It just swirls and twirls. I can get places I like to with it, and I can get in some skinny water, you know, other boaters can't get to, but it has its drawbacks. And one of them is it can be a hard boat to control, especially when it's windy. It's hard to make casts. It's hard to make targeted casts. And believe me, that's important. So we tried fishing those frogs. We didn't get anything. We got bupkis, and we decided we knew those frogs were the deal. We knew that they were going to work. So instead of cutting and retying, we decided to move on and wait for the conditions to improve so that we could come back and fish the area more efficiently. We ended up catching fish in other parts of the lake a little bit deeper using different types of presentations. But we ended up coming back to that spot, that same spot, a little bit later. And sure enough, the wind had calmed down and the boat was able to sit in the current without spinning around everywhere. And we were able to catch some pretty good bass. We knew it was going to work. We just had to fit the situation with the presentation. And in the end, we ended up catching some nice bass. Got him! Oh no, dang it, he spit it. That's a blow up. See if I can get back in there and get him. I had him for a second. I got him now. He's not big. Look at him.
Yeah.
What did I say? What did I say? All right. So if you know the lure is going to work, but you're not able to fish it, that's one reason. But what about if it's not catching any fish? Well, it might not catch fish in that spot, but does that mean give up on it for the day? Probably not. I would really try to use it in a different spot later if I saw the conditions and I said, this place, this is the good spot for that. I would at least try it there. Maybe the water needs to be a little bit different. Maybe the current needs to be a little bit different. You know, a lot of times just one little change to one little variable can make all the difference. Now, on the other hand, I'm not fishing it today. If I haven't gotten something, if I haven't gotten any indication that those bass are interested in that lure in the first few minutes that I'm, fishing it, I'm going to put it back down. And after a couple times of doing that during the course of the day, I'm probably not going back to it. I've said, okay, I've tried this. I've done everything that I could with it, and it's just not doing anything today. It's time to be done with it. And case in point, where I have basically changed my mind on a couple of things. Whenever we were fishing those balls of fry, I said that I wasn't using something like this. And that's true because I was not having any success with it. But when those conditions changed and things set up just a little bit more differently, I found that when I went back to this, I was actually able to have some success. And the place that I was having success was shallow water right along a weed edge. Before I was fishing this more in the deeper water around those fry balls. And even though the bass were busting, they were ignoring this. But on a lark today, I decided I was going to tie this back on and give it another chance. And instead of, getting a skunk on it, it actually caught me a couple of nice fish. So, I picked it back up and I started working with it again. If it can catch one fish, it can catch another. If it can catch another, who knows? Conditions matter. This had to be thrown in the right conditions. And again, chasing one variable, changing just one single variable, the water depth meant everything. And I went from not getting any strikes at all to getting several nice blow-ups on this and catching a couple of nice fish. And again, I also said that something like this right here, something like the good old boy howdy, this was something else that I wasn't getting any success on. But I figured if I was getting something on that spook, if I could get a bite or two on that spook, maybe I could get a bite or two on this. So after I felt like that spook had done everything it could for me and the bites had kind of dried up, we were still kind of in the same area in that same stretch. I tied this on and I went to work just a little bit closer to the bank, right in the seams of that heavy vegetation, right where that hydrilla, hadn't come all the way up to the surface where I had a channel I could work this through. And you know what? It actually caught me a really nice fish today. So again, I came back to it. The other day, it wasn't working. I put it down and I gave it a chance and came back to it today because the conditions had changed. Now, as far as putting something down for the year, well, that's when you're going to have to notice how those bass are moving. If the weather patterns or if the bass behavior, if they're moving out from someplace for the entire year, if we're moving from the summer into the fall pattern, you are going to have to change up your presentations. But a lot of times it's not exactly the way you think it is, right? Let those bass dictate how you change what you throw. I guess that's the sum up of everything here, is don't be married to any single idea. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, be ready to move on to something else. And whenever the seasons roll around and we're changing up different types of baits, well, even something like this can work well into the winter. And something like a hard jerkbait, that can work all year long. It used to be, guys were throwing jerkbaits only in the wintertime. I throw a jerkbait all the time. I'll probably throw a jerkbait the next time I'm out on the water. So it all depends. Like I said, let those bass dictate the lures and presentations that you pick. And you're going to find that you not only have an easier time of it, but you're actually going to catch a lot more bass. Now, before I go, I want to give you an update on that Vega frog. And this is going to be the final update because, well, something happened, something changed. And that is, well, I gave it to my wife. She wanted to try it out. And you guys know I was out on the water with it just the other day. I had a fish blow up on it 3 times and miss it all 3 times. And she says, well, let me give it a try. I said, okay, it's nothing but a heartbreaker. But you know what? She showed me up again, guys. Take a look at this. You got him?
On the Vega frog, I'm trying not to lose him.
That's a good fish. You barely.
It's a little fish.
No, it's actually a pretty good fish, but you barely have him. That's a good fish.
Okay.
Look at you making me look like a goober. Look at you making me look like a goober. I knew you were going to get one. You barely had him.
That's why I had to baby it.
You did good. Look how dark and gorgeous that fish is.
He is pretty.
Sweetheart, that's
At least a pound.
pound and a half, almost pound, right at pound and 3/4. That's a good fat fish right there. That is a great fat fish. You done good, sweetheart.
All right.
Your fish, you release it. That's right. Her first blow up, she caught a fish. She caught a very nice fish. She barely had it. She barely had that thing. But you know what the difference between barely had the fish and had the fish? Nothing. They were both in the boat. So I got to give it to her. I told her, this is your frog now. You can have that thing. I don't know what she did differently. The only thing that we can think of is perhaps that because that bass blew up on it in a big muck of hydrilla, that the bass somehow got it a different way, that hydrilla may have played in it some way, or maybe she's just better fishing than I am. There's that as well. Again, that's one lure I knew exactly when to put down and never retie. And now she's got herself a great frog. So there you have it. When to keep fishing a lure and when to change it out. Let those bass dictate that for you. Sometimes we just need to give it a little bit of a different chance. Sometimes a little change of water, a little change of conditions can make all the difference in the world. Sometimes those bass just don't want it that day and it's time to cut and retie. Again, let those bass dictate the baits you throw and how you use them. Thanks for watching Lowbrow Fishing. We'll catch you in the next one.